Alright, to get started, I'll get the easy tasks out of the way. First, I'll start with the tutorial UI. The user story states, as the player, I want to see the controls so I know how to play the game. Easy enough, I decided to put the controls of the game up since we have multiple mechanics to utilize in the build. For the subtasks, we wanted to make sure there was text that displays the controls for each different mechanic. Second is the inventory UI, which user story states, as the player, I want to see what I currently have equipped so that I know what I can do. With this task, I set up the UI in Dark Souls fashion to display the equipped weapon in the right hand and the left hand as well. It's not a fully functional inventory, but it displays an Estus flask that you can use to heal yourself, and I added the infinity sign since there's no functionality for using items in the game yet. The subtasks are basically just making sure that I have a sword, shield, and a flask for the player to see. Next, I'm going to talk about the avatar player attack, and the user story for that is, as an avatar and the player, I want the ability to use the weapon the player has equipped so that I can defeat my enemy. We had some issues with this task. The first subtask is the sword swings and on collision it deals damage. The collider dealt damage when it was on top of the player, but it was doing it at a constant rate. We ended up working on it together, and with some problem solving, I noticed that it was set to get key instead of get key down. But there was another issue where the collider was still dealing damage constantly when the collider was on the player. To fix this, I utilized animation events and created a function to call during a certain point in the animation. I also helped on jumping, so I made another task for the bug, and the user story for that is, as a player, I want to jump once so that I can't skip content in the level. For that, I had to figure out why the player was jumping constantly while in the air, rather than only jumping once. It had something to do with the nav mesh component which was on the player, but it didn't need to be there, so deleting that ended up fixing our jumping bug. Next, I worked on the sprint mechanic. The user story is, as an avatar, I want to be able to use my stamina to increase my avatar's speed. For this, I made a walk speed variable, a sprint speed variable, and a bool that lets me know if the player is moving. This allows the player to sprint on input only when they're moving. The next thing I worked on is the enemy projectiles. The user story is, as the enemy, I want to shoot a projectile that damages the player. I don't have the testing function for the projectiles in this build, but you can see that projectiles fire from this enemy turret right here. The function for this build has them spray out in abundance, and you'll see why here in a second. The next thing I helped on was the boss health. As the boss, I want to see my health so I will know when I'm close to dying. For this, I set up a UI that pops up whenever you enter the boss room, and a script that determines the boss's current health as it goes down. Now, one of my favorite things that I worked on is the boss spin attack. As the enemy boss, I want to perform a special attack when my health reaches a certain point, so that I can make it hard for the player to reach me. For this, I set up an animation. The boss raises his sword to alert the player it's about to do something big. I have testing functionality that shows just the animation for when he's spinning, but when the boss's health reaches 75% and 45%, he does the animation which triggers his shooting functionality. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the task to get the enemies to stop moving while attacking. As the enemy, I want to telegraph my attack so the player can dodge it. We were having an issue where the enemies were constantly looking at the players, so when they did their hit animation, it would hit the player every single time, and they would constantly chase the player while they were performing their attack. So now I have it set up through an animation event to determine when they are attacking and when they're not attacking. So if they are attacking, they won't move, and when they are attacking, they'll chase the player and look his way. This gives the player time to dodge, just like in Dark Souls.